roughly about 90 minutes. And that would give us time for question and answer session, and that would also give us time to do some book signing, for you to do some book signing to those who want to.
Please remember that. So we finish with the essence of Olodumare, just in Yoruba tradition. So whatever we do today is going to energize and open the way for us to prosper in truth, to return back to the primordial deity, Mother Nature, to guide us to our essence, how we came on this planet, what we need to do on this planet for eternity. Ashe. Ashe. Ashe.
Any day before yesterday. So before I go any further, let me get this out of the way. I was supposed to be here in March. I think some of you may know that. I went to Glasgow, Scotland to do some research, and then from there to South America, French Guyana. And as it turned out, the sisters and brothers in French Guyana thought it was a good time to have a national strike. And the airports were shut down, so I couldn't leave for several days. So I'm here now, and I'm very, very pleased to be here. I'm gratified by the turnout. And it really makes me feel good to see that there is a strong hunger and thirst for knowledge of self. So what I'm going to do is, I've been asked to focus, unless I'm mistaken, because I only have about 150,000 photographs here, that's all. And meaning I can talk about almost anything in relationship to African people, which is anything and everything. But I believe the subject matter calls for me to address the issue of the African presence in Europe and Asia. So that's what I'm going to do, and it's going to be a visual presentation. So I hope everybody can see. Can everybody see clearly? Am I in the way? No. All right, before we get on to that, though, let me just for a minute, as you can see, I'm very relaxed. I got my most comfortable clothes on, and I'm in a good mood. I want to thank Books of Africa, my friend Nigel, and our colleague who is not here, Emmanuel, for making the arrangements, and of course, the host of this venue. I'm very grateful. It's just a nice energy here, isn't it? It's a nice vibe. We've called on the ancestors, so we're in good shape. Now, before I really talk about the African presence in Europe and Asia, let me just mention briefly, although I really don't need to do it here, I can see, but so we have a little more ammunition as we go out into the world to talk about why knowledge of self is important. And I suppose that the image that I have before you now, the two images, personify that more than anything else. Now, on the one hand, you have this brother right here, who I guess everybody recognizes as El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, better known as Malcolm X, who we call in the United States our black shining prince. But on the other side, you may not recognize this brother right here, because we are not born with knowledge. I know a lot of us think that we know everything. We've been to Egypt once or twice, and we got an ankh around our neck, and we got an African name and a little bit of mudcloth, so we know everything about Africa. Okay? And there's a tendency on the part of many of us in our community to look down on other people who we think do not have the same level of consciousness. And that's not a good thing. This knowledge should give you a sense of humility rather than arrogance. It doesn't always work that way. But before Malcolm X was Malcolm X, he was Detroit Red, among other things. Even though Malcolm's parents were Garveyites, and I would ask you to lay low on the photographs, please, that before Malcolm was Malcolm, he was Detroit Red. Even though his parents were Garveyites, the great Marcus Mosiah Garvey, Malcolm at some point went astray and became tantamount to a common criminal. And he was incarcerated, he came under the influence, we know of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, but he read extensively. He read the works of Carter G. Woodson, he read Joel Augustus Rogers, J. Rogers, who I'm going to talk about more and more, and he was transformed into that black shining prince. These are the reasons why history, why knowledge of self is important. We are confronted with this question all the time. At least I am. I've been to 120 countries now, and I've lectured in 65 countries. In fact, in a week and a half, I'm actually going to do a lecture in Vienna, Austria for the first time. So people say, Runoko, I got all kind of problems. I don't have a job. My girlfriend left me. You know, I got all kind of issues. Why are you talking about what happened yesterday? And my response is basically simple. How do you prepare for today and tomorrow if you don't know what happened yesterday? All strong people never let you forget their history. On the way here, we passed through an Orthodox Jewish community. The Jews are a perfect example of that. They never let you forget their history. They cram it down your throat. And I don't blame them for that. I ain't mad at them. I'm mad at us because we allow people to say that was a long time ago, forget it. I got to move on. I got to focus on today. I ain't got time for tomorrow. That is a statement of a lost people. You can directly measure a people's status in the world by the emphasis that they put on their history and culture. Strong people talk about history all the time. We even know about bad white people. I'm in the Whitechapel district. That's where I'm staying right now. That's where the Jack the Ripper was, right? Everybody's heard of Jack the Ripper. You've heard of Jesse James and Al Capone and Adolf Hitler and even Count Dracula. But the same people who immortalize their history tell you, either you don't have a history or you need to get over it. And so we need to make our history sacred. Just like we know the names of great athletes. Everybody knows Usain Bolt. Everybody knows LeBron James. But how many Africans can tell you the name of a single African who lived before slavery? Most of us don't even know King Tut. So we have a lot of work to do. And all of the presentations that I do deal with that theme to some extent or another. Are we clear on that? All right. Now let's talk about, I think this is the first time I've done this presentation. God knows what's going to pop up here. But let's spend a little time. I think we can talk about African scholars who have dealt with the issue of African presence in Europe and Asia as well. And of course, there I am, looking young and handsome, but the reason I'm in this picture is because I thought you'd get a laugh out of that. The reason I'm in this picture is just to showcase my relationship with one of the greatest scholars we've ever produced, and that is the great Ivan Van Sertima, Ivan Gladstone Van Sertima, who was born in the former British colony of Guyana, was British Guyana at the time. And Guyana has produced some of our most dynamic scholars. Walter Rodney came from there. And a man named Jan Carew came from there, who was a big influence on Dr. Van Sertima. And you may have heard of a man named George G.M. James, who wrote a classic work called Stolen Legacy, about how African philosophy has been plagiarized by the Greeks. So Guyana has produced some brilliant scholars and Pan-Africans from there. And Ivan was one of the best. I was fortunate enough to work with him for 25 years. And if I do say so myself, Ivan, I hope you agree, I was your best student, at least your most prolific student. We know that he wrote a book called There Came Before Columbus, The African Presence in Ancient America. But in 1979, he founded a publication called the Journal of African Civilizations. And in this book, or this series of books, he dealt not only with the Nile Valley, but he dealt extensively with the African presence in Europe, including the Moors, and we collaborated on the African presence in early Asia as well. So Ivan, I miss you. And I believe the dead don't die. I believe the dead live in us and through us. And as long as their names are kept alive, they're kept alive. As long as their deeds are kept alive, their vision is kept alive through us, then they live forever. I think that's an African concept. And then I think the greatest scholar, African scholar in particular, and when I say African, I'm talking about all black people. I'm from the Peter Tosh School of Thought that goes, no matter where you come from, as long as you're a black man, you're an African. So if you find an African at the, somebody at the North Pole and they look like you and me, he's a member of the club, or she's a member of the club. Joe Augustus Rogers was born in Jamaica, I think in September 17, 1880, or September 1880 anyway. He moved to the United States. He was shocked when he moved to the United States to find that even though he was a light-skinned brother, light complexion, that he was treated just like everybody else. And he encountered racism there, big time. But that did not deter him. Rogers worked for an investment company in Chicago, and he quit the job to become a Pullman porter to work on the trains. Okay? so that he could travel around to different cities and go to different libraries and do research. And he found that in some cases, black people could not go in the public libraries, even in the cities in the north, like New York and Boston and Philly and what have you. Roger said, okay, he paid the white Pullman conductor to go in the libraries and get the books. That's serious stuff. Rogers did not have a major publishing house. He eventually organized his own publishing house because he didn't want his work censored. He didn't want his stuff edited. In 1930, when Selassie was coronated Emperor of Ethiopia, J. Rogers stole away aboard a ship, stowed away, and went to Ethiopia to attend the coronation ceremony. And apparently Selassie was so impressed he gave him a coronation medal. In 1935, Rogers went back to Ethiopia because the Italian fascist government under Mussolini had invaded Ethiopia, and Rogers wanted to report on it for what we call the Negro press. But Rogers also did extensive work on the African presence in Europe in particular. He lived in Europe. In fact, to be honest with you, I would like to come and live here. I'd like to come and stay for a year or two. There's so many research possibilities here. And there's so much diversity even in the African community here. And these museums are here, which reminds me, it's a nice time to plug the fact that I'm giving a tour of the British Museum next Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. And at 1 o'clock in the afternoon in the Petrie Museum, which is just nearby. Yes, it does cost some money. And you can go in the British Museum anytime for free. But I'm trying to scuffle and raise some money for this research. Who do you think paid for the ticket to come over here? Who do you think is paying for the hotel? Revolution is not free. And we should not gripe and complain when we are asked to pay some money. If you want something free, you're in the wrong place. You ain't gonna never be free if you want it for free. So Rogers was a great man. He wrote a book called Nature Knows No Color Line, and he wrote a series of books called Sex and Race, and perhaps his most popular work was World's Great Men of Color. But he wrote a bunch of books. Rogers was a bad brother. When I was told Rogers had gone to 60 countries, I made up my mind that I was going to go to 65, and now I'm at the nice even number of 120, and I still got a lot of juice in the tank. All right. And then another brother from the Caribbean, is something about these Africans from the Caribbean, I'm telling you, who have done great work. Here's another one. His name is Edward Vivian Scobie. In fact, he actually joined, maybe before he gained his consciousness, the Royal Air Force in World War II. He was from Dominica, and he became mayor of Rousseau, the capital of Dominica. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. He did a work called Flag Britannia, which is still maybe the best book on the subject. He did another book called The Global African Presence, and I was actually fortunate enough to work with him and actually even edited some of his work, Edward Vivian Scobie. And then if we're going to talk about, and here's another brother, bad brother right here. Everybody should know him. And this is Carter Godwin Woodson, or Carter G. Woodson, Dr. Woodson, who wrote a lot of books himself. He wrote a book called, his most famous book is Miseducation of the Negro. And in that book, he said something that still resonates with me and should resonate with all of us. He said, if you control a man's thinking, you don't have to worry about his actions. If you control a man's thinking, that brother is going to go to the back door. He's going to look for the back door. And if there is no back door, he will create a back door because his conditioning dictates that he do so. But Rogers, Woodson, in addition to being the founder of a publication called the Journal of Negro History also, he also founded a publication called the Negro History Bulletin, which was more basic and fundamental. And I think it was in 1940-41, he had a whole issue of it devoted to the African presence in early Europe, and another one devoted to the African presence in early Asia. So this is not new. These brothers have been around for a long time. This work has been around for a long time. In fact, since I'm thinking about it, both Rogers and Carter G. Woodson lectured for the UNIACL, Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League. Garvey was able to galvanize all of this energy. And that's one of the things I love about Garvey. If I had been there at that time, I'd have worked closely with Garvey myself. Just like I would have worked closely with Malcolm, like John Henry Clark worked with Malcolm. The greatest of our activists understand the importance of history. They do not see it as mutually exclusive. This is the newest book that Books of Africa has done. for me. I'm very proud of my association with Books of Africa. They've done 4 books for me now. They do very quality work. And you want that as a historian when you want your stuff to look good. And my stuff looks good with them. So, and this is also my first book for children. People have been talking about it for a while. So I wanted to do a book for children and beginners. Now this is and there's my daughter, Assata Garvey, named after Assata Shakur and Marcus Garvey. In fact, this photograph, which was not the one that I wanted to use for the cover, but it was the best photograph in terms of the quality. This was actually taken on the Nile River last summer. My daughter will be 12 next week, God willing, and so I took her mother and my daughter on a trip to Egypt last summer. And while we were there, we were on the same cruise ship with Asha Kwesi, who I've had issues with over the years. And Tony Browder, after this, I took a group to Sudan, and Tony Browder brought a group with me to Sudan. It's important that the community see the scholars working together. They must perceive that our egos are not so big that we're not able to see the big picture. And so when we come together, whatever differences we've had in the past, we say that was in the past. If the people going around talking about Maat and Imhotep and wearing ankhs and cartouches, if we can't come together, then what does that say about the wider community? We must be examples. People must see us and be inspired by us. So this photograph has some historical significance in that regard. Now this is the second book, or the second most recent book done by Books of Africa, which is one of my most important works for me because it's dedicated to Ivan Van Sertima. And then this is my most recent book, period. I'm a very prolific brother. I'm working on 2 new books right now. Hopefully they'll be out next year. I brought one of these just to sell because I didn't want to be in competition with the bookstore, but I figured that my taxi fare would be alleviated if I was able to sell at least one of these books because I'm going to the British Museum tomorrow. I got one to sell for you.
Just one.
Just one. I got some more in my hotel room, but I want y'all to buy the property of this one white man who was the king of Belgium, and he was a butcher. He massacred African people. He made examples of Africans if they didn't bring enough rubber and diamonds and what have you. So they also took a lot of artifacts from Central Africa, and they are there now. Now there's a big museum right outside of Brussels called the Central African Museum that is now closed for renovation, maybe closed for another 8 or 10 years or so. But I was able to visit it twice right before it closed, and I talked to one of the curators, and she said, Dr. Rashidi, we have these kinds of bones in the basement of the museum that may be 90,000 years old. 90,000 years old. And of course, lots of Nile Valley pieces. Does anybody know what this is? Anyone? This is Perdonk. Who was Perdonk, you ask? This is the mother of Imhotep. And this is a little bitty statue about this big in the Louvre in Paris. If Europeans excel at anything, stealing comes to the top of the list. Now, this is important because a lot of times you see the images of Imhotep. You all know who Imhotep is, right? It's amazing we didn't call him in the libation ceremony. Now, if we had to do all over again, we'd call on the brother and a lot of other ancestors too. Imhotep is the world's first scientist. He's known as the father of medicine. He's a poet. He's the first known architect that we are aware of, and many, many other things. But the images of Imhotep that we see tend to be very small statues done a couple thousand years after he died. He was deified as a kind of a god of writing and a god of medicine. So it's hard to look at these little statues and see his racial characteristics, his ethnic features. But looking at this, there's no doubt about it. And this is his mama. Imhotep was so bad, he was so tough, he was so good, if you prefer, that his mother was deified too, just because she was the mother of Imhotep. And here's a slightly larger version of it. This is in the book, the Ivan Van Sertima papers. And this is the best image of Imhotep I've found so far. I found this in a museum in Barcelona last summer. I led a group called the National Association of Black Social Workers in the United States on a tour of Spain. And the tour ended in Barcelona, and after the group left, I spent a day there by myself, looking through the museums. And this is in a new Egyptian museum in Barcelona. Look at those big ears. I call those Barack Obama ears. Apparently the idea was the bigger the ear, the more you could hear, and the more you heard, the more you would know, and the more you knew, the more power you would possess. I like that concept. The idea that ignorance is evil, we should abhor that. I mean, that's what they said in Kemet, ignorance is evil. In the West, we are taught ignorance is bliss. This is a personal friend of mine. And the brother in the middle is a friend of mine too. He's the head of an organization called the Carol Adalit Panthers. They name themselves after the Black Panther Party. And when they greet each other, they say black salutes. And they say black is proud, black is strong. We salute the blacks alone. So don't ever come to me talking about there ain't no black people in India. Because there's a bunch of them there. And a lot of them have a lot of consciousness. And they want to hook up with people like us. There are people like this all over the world. A couple weeks ago, I got an email from a brother from Iraq who talked to me about the oppression of black people in southern Iraq. Wherever we are in the world, we're on the bottom. Look at those big ears right there, like he could fly. From Nepal and Pakistan.